The most destructive force in your life as an empath isn't loud hatred, open betrayal, or even the calculated manipulation of a narcissist. It is something far more quiet, deeply invisible, and aggressively corrosive: jealous energy. We are taught to look out for obvious villains and overt attacks, but the quiet malice of envy travels under the radar, acting like an emotional airborne toxin. You can feel it in a room before a single word is spoken. It is that sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature when you share good news, or that heavy, draining exhaustion you feel after spending time with someone who claims to be your friend. Because you are naturally wired to absorb the emotional states of those around you, this toxic energy doesn't just sit in the room. It searches for a way inside you. To truly protect yourself, you have to understand what this energy actually is. And that requires looking at it through the lens of legendary psychologist Carl Jung. Jung discovered that jealousy is almost never about the superficial things people think it is. It isn't about your car, your looks, your relationship, or your paycheck. Jung called jealousy a projection of the unlived life. Every single human being carries a repository of buried desires, unfulfilled talents, and abandoned dreams. Parts of themselves they were too afraid to pursue, so they packed them away in the dark. When an envious person looks at you, they aren't actually seeing you as an individual. Instead, your natural light, authenticity, and success act as a giant mirror. Your presence forces them to look directly at their own wasted potential, their own laziness, and their own cowardice. This reflection is incredibly painful for them to face, and it fills them with an intense, unconscious rage. Instead of doing the hard internal work to fix their own lives, it is much easier for their ego to point the finger outward and hate the mirror. They resent you simply for existing in your fullness because your joy highlights their lack. For an empath, this is where the trap snaps shut. Because you cannot see this hidden psychological war, you mistake their coldness or passive-aggressive jabs for a flaw in yourself. You start twisting your own mind into knots, wondering what you did wrong or why they are pulling away. But the truth is entirely liberating. Their bitterness has absolutely nothing to do with you. Once you realize that their anger is just the sound of their own internal handcuffs, you can stop taking it personally. Here is exactly how you stop playing their game and build an unbreakable shield against it. To truly protect yourself, you first need to understand exactly why you are so vulnerable to this silent attack in the first place. Carl Jung noted that certain highly sensitive individuals, whom we today call empaths, possess what he described as heightened psychic permeability. Think of your psyche not as a solid brick wall, but as a finely woven screen door. Your emotional boundaries are naturally thin, porous, and open to the environment. On a good day, this thin boundary is your greatest superpower. It is the exact reason you can walk into a room and instantly read the unspoken vibe, accurately sense hidden emotional shifts, and understand what others are feeling before they even say a word. But this exact same openness comes with a massive, dangerous catch. Because your energetic skin is so thin, jealous energy doesn't just bounce off you. It seeps directly through the screen, soaking deep into your emotional nervous system. When you absorb this toxic energy without realizing what is happening, you fall straight into a psychological trap that Jung called participation mystique. This is a fancy term for a very dangerous reality, an unconscious, automatic merging of your psyche with someone else's. Without your permission, your mind connects to theirs, and the lines between where you end and they begin completely blur. Because you are a natural emotional sponge, you take their unspoken malice, their bitter resentment, and their hidden envy, and you pull it deep inside your own chest. The terrifying part about this process is that it happens completely silently. There are no alarms going off, no flashing red lights to warn you that you are absorbing poison. You simply walk away from an interaction feeling completely altered, unaware that you have just swallowed someone else's emotional waste. Once that toxic energy settles inside you, it completely distorts your reality. You suddenly start feeling a wave of intense anxiety, a heavy cloud of self-doubt, or a profound sense of exhaustion that seemingly came out of nowhere. Just an hour ago, you were feeling happy, confident, and proud of your achievements. Now suddenly, you are second-guessing everything. You begin to feel an overwhelming sense of guilt just for being successful, talented, or happy. You start thinking that maybe you are being too much, too loud, or too visible. What you don't realize is that none of these feelings actually belong to you. You are experiencing a psychological hostile takeover. You are actively carrying their hidden flaws, their unresolved bitterness, and their toxic shadow, as if it were your own personal fault. This emotional hijacking always leads to the exact same devastating result. You begin to shrink. Because the weight of their absorbed envy feels so uncomfortable and heavy, your natural instinct is to find a way to make the bad feelings stop. Subconsciously, you realize that if you dim your light, apologize for your success, and downplay your gifts, the jealous person will feel less threatened and stop sending the toxic energy your way. So you start playing small, just to keep the peace. You hold back your best ideas, you mute your personality, and you camouflage your joy, completely exhausting yourself just to make insecure people feel comfortable around you. You become a prisoner to their shadow, sacrificing your own growth and happiness to nurse wounds that you didn't even create. To break free from this exhausting cycle and stop swallowing the emotional poison of others, you must master a specific psychological skill that Carl Jung called conscious differentiation. Think of this as installing a high-tech security system for your mind. It is the immediate, sharp, and highly disciplined ability to pause in the middle of a tense moment, look directly at someone's negative vibe, and ask yourself one liberating question. Is this feeling mine? Or is it theirs? Most empaths skip this step entirely. When a heavy cloud of tension, passive aggression, or silent resentment enters the room, you naturally open your emotional arms and adopt it as your own. Conscious differentiation is the act of drawing a hard line in the sand. It is the moment you step back, look at the sudden self-doubt or anxiety swirling inside you, and realize that you didn't generate that darkness, you just walked into it. You have to understand the secret rules of the game. Jealousy can only hurt you if it remains completely invisible. It relies entirely on your blindness. The toxic energy of an envious person needs you to stay confused, unaware, and highly sensitive so that you will naturally internalize their attack and blame yourself. It operates like a psychological parasite, desperate to find a host to feed on. But the absolute second you wake up to what is happening, the entire game changes. The moment you look at their backhanded compliment, their cold silence, or their petty criticism and mentally label it exactly what it is, their unresolved issue, their insecurity, and their misery, the entire manipulative dynamic completely breaks down. By naming it, you strip it of its power. You take the blindfold off, and you refuse to be the scapegoat for their internal failures. Jung called this empowering shift the withdrawal of projection. When you consciously refuse to accept someone else's toxic shadow as your personal truth, their jealousy suddenly loses its landing strip. It has absolutely nowhere to land, nowhere to anchor itself, and no way to infect your mind. Imagine someone throwing a ball of hot coal directly at your chest. Instead of catching it with your bare hands and letting it burn you, you simply step out of the way and let it drop to the floor. By practicing this detachment, the energy doesn't just disappear, it boomerangs straight back to its original sender. You are effectively holding up a massive psychological mirror and saying, "No thank you, this belongs to you." When that toxic energy snaps back to the jealous person, something fascinating and incredibly intense happens. Because you have completely refused to act as their emotional garbage can, they are suddenly left holding their own trash. They can no longer use you as a convenient distraction or a container for their unresolved pain. They are forced to sit face to face with their own shadow, their own wasted potential, their own laziness, and the bitter reality of their own life choices. Most people absolutely cannot handle this level of raw confrontation with themselves, which is why they might get even angrier or choose to back away from you entirely. But that is no longer your problem. By mastering the art of mental separation, you ensure that their internal misery stays exactly where it belongs, with them, leaving you completely free to carry your own light without carrying their heavy bags. When it comes to protecting your peace as an empath, most people will tell you to build massive walls, cut everyone off, and go into hiding. But building a thick emotional wall is an exhausting, flawed strategy, because walls don't just keep the bad stuff out, they keep you trapped inside, isolated, and constantly on guard. Carl Jung discovered that the ultimate, foolproof defense against toxic energy isn't a wall at all. It is a profound state of psychological wholeness that he called individuation. Individuation is the lifelong process of discovering, accepting, and fully integrating every single part of who you are. Your strengths, your quirks, your sensitivity, and your flaws. It means becoming so deeply rooted and completely secure in your own skin that you no longer look to the outside world to validate your existence or tell you what you are worth. When you achieve this level of internal alignment, you become a solid, unshakable structure. External opinions, petty gossip, and envious glares lose their power entirely because they simply cannot find a single crack, insecurity, or self-doubt in your psyche to exploit. Once you are anchored in your own wholeness, your entire strategy changes. Instead of wasting your precious time fighting the envy of others, or shrinking away in fear to hide from it, you begin to operate from a position of ultimate power called non-reactive awareness. Think of this as becoming the calm, unbothered observer of the storm. When someone shoots a passive-aggressive comment your way, or tries to dim your joy with a bitter look, you don't get defensive, you don't argue, and you don't try to fix their mood. Instead, you simply look right through the behavior. You see the jealousy for exactly what it is, a loud, desperate cry of someone else's internal pain, lack, and unresolved misery. You recognize that their behavior is a reflection of their internal prison, not your reality. You acknowledge it, you label it mentally, and then you make the conscious, powerful choice not to carry it. You don't take the bait. You don't let it penetrate your emotional skin because you know that their opinion of you is none of your business. This is the hardest but most liberating truth you will ever learn as an empath. Envy can only hurt you if you secretly doubt your own worth. Jealous energy requires a partner. It needs a hook inside your own mind to latch onto. If you secretly harbor feelings of unworthiness, or if you feel guilty for being talented, beautiful, or successful, then a jealous person's energy will instantly connect with that hidden self-doubt and tear you apart from the inside out. But the absolute moment you stop apologizing for your gifts, the game is over. When you completely own your power, your talents, and your deep sensitivity without shame or hesitation, the entire dynamic flips. You realize that you don't owe anyone a smaller version of yourself just to make them feel better about their own stagnation. When you fully inhabit your true authority, jealous energy undergoes a radical transformation. It ceases to be a dangerous, toxic threat and instead becomes completely meaningless background noise, like the faint sound of traffic outside or rain falling on a solid stone. The rain might pour down, it might wash over the stone, and it might make the surface wet for a moment, but it can never penetrate the core of the rock. The stone remains entirely unchanged, unmoved, and structurally sound. Present, but completely powerless. That is what happens to envy when it hits a whole, individuated empath. It can ripple through the room all at once, but it completely fails to make you doubt your path, dim your light, or compromise your joy for even a single second. This is where everything you've learned coalesces into a permanent defense mechanism, what we call the lifetime shield. Unlike physical walls that isolate you from the world and turn you into a lonely prisoner of your own making, or fake compliance that completely exhausts your spirit as you try to please everyone, this mental shield operates on an entirely different set of rules. It is a living, breathing, psychological boundary that actually grows stronger, thicker, and more resilient every single time you use it. Think of it like a muscle that thrives on resistance. Every single time you walk into a room, encounter an envious person, and consciously refuse to shrink your presence or dim your light to make them comfortable, something incredible happens inside your psyche. Your self-sovereignty deepens. You are sending a powerful command to your own subconscious mind that your space, your joy, and your success are non-negotiable, and that you will no longer offer yourself up as a sacrifice on the altar of someone else's insecurity. The ultimate beauty of this shield is that it frees you from the exhausting cycle of constant warfare and hypervigilance. You don't need to spend your life avoiding tough crowds. You don't need to walk on eggshells, and you certainly don't need to waste your precious energy fighting back, arguing, or defending your worth to people who are determined to misunderstand you. Fighting back only feeds their toxic energy, and hiding only validates their power over you. Instead, you do something far more radical and devastating to an envious person. You simply outgrow the need for their approval entirely. You rise above the frequency of their noise. When you no longer crave the validation of people who are committed to their own stagnation, their dirty looks and passive-aggressive whispers lose their gravity. They stop pulling you down because you have detached yourself from their orbit completely. True, impenetrable protection is not about being aggressive, loud, or confrontational. It is the quiet, radical, and totally unstoppable act of becoming entirely, unapologetically, and irreversibly yourself. When you fully inhabit your own skin, live in alignment with your truth, and own your unique gifts without asking for permission or forgiveness, you become a force that jealous energy simply cannot penetrate. You stop looking at your deep sensitivity as a curse or a vulnerability, and you start operating from it as your absolute greatest superpower. You realize that you are never meant to carry the heavy bags of other people's unlived lives or handle the emotional garbage they refuse to process. Your only job on this planet is to burn brightly, live fully, and expand into the highest version of who you are meant to be. If this deeply resonated with your soul today, and if you are ready to stop playing small for insecure people, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Do not keep this realization to yourself. Share this video with another empath in your life who is currently drowning in someone else's toxic shadow, struggling to stay afloat, and desperately needs to hear this truth today so they can finally reclaim their energy, stand in their true authority, and take back their space. In the end, your journey as a highly sensitive person isn't about learning how to fight dirty or discovering how to hide away from the world. It is about realizing that your light was never the problem, and their darkness was never your responsibility to fix. By stepping out of the trap of their unlived lives and refusing to absorb the silent poison of envy, you break the cycle of emotional exhaustion for good. You no longer have to carry the heavy weight of someone else's shadow, nor do you have to apologize for the space you take up or the gifts you possess. You are finally free to exist in your absolute fullness, completely protected by the unshakable truth of who you are. Stand tall in your sovereignty. Let the background noise fade away completely, and remember that the most powerful shield you will ever wear is the radical, beautiful choice to be entirely, unapologetically yourself.